So we've been talking before the call here about, some of the maybe hidden or secret or maybe they're obvious, but people just don't know about them, pieces of LinkedIn. And I really am super excited right now because there are so many changes in the world through the Great Resignation, through mass layoffs that we're seeing with some companies, through the pandemic's ups and downs and everything. Like there's just so many changes happening. And I think understanding the tools that people are using to navigate these changes is really important. You've got such a deep history here. So maybe we can just kick off. I'd love to get your thoughts on before we get into the modern day of LinkedIn, like how has LinkedIn changed over the years? Like what are some of the things that people maybe don't realize about the platform and how it's evolved over time?
Yeah, great question. First of all, thanks for having me on the show, Martin. Ever
Thanks for
since you
being
and
here.
I worked together at Udacity, I've always been a huge fan of yours. I know you've, helped so many job seekers around the world unlock opportunities. So
I appreciate that.
definitely love this opportunity to share what I've learned as well. Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I worked for LinkedIn about a decade ago, right after they IPO'd, and LinkedIn was in a lot of flux, of course, as any company that goes public naturally is. But here's the funny thing: is even 5 years after it was founded, or 15 years after it went public, the core things that drive LinkedIn have actually remained the same, no matter how the site has looked different. And that is that if you were a recruiter who existed before LinkedIn, think about how terrible your job was. Maybe back in the day, 50 or 100 years ago, you were posting classified ads in the newspaper, hoping desperately to find someone who would respond. Or in the 90s, maybe you were going on monster.com and being overwhelmed with all these resumes from people who weren't even really qualified for your role. And then all of a sudden, sometime around 2005, the switch is flipped, where basically you have all the power for the first time in the history of recruiting. You can go onto the web, you can say, I need a product manager or an engineer or a salesperson, and find the very best people in the world, no matter where they are. That has never existed before. And that fundamental truth has been true for the last 15 years. It'll be true for the next 15 as well. So if you're a job seeker, don't be thrown by all the bells and whistles, all the new features. Just make sure you understand the recruiter behind the scenes and you use that understanding to make sure that you get found.
I love that. And what are some of the bells and whistles that typically distract people? What would you say are the things that are least important that people spend way too much time on?
Yeah, I'll give you two really good examples. And I know my old LinkedIn colleagues are going to kill me for saying this, but the first one is definitely LinkedIn Premium. And obviously LinkedIn is a public business and it's in its interest to try to get people to buy as much stuff. But the reality is that the core functionality of making yourself visible to recruiters on LinkedIn doesn't cost a cent and never will, because recruiters are the ones who actually drive the most revenue to LinkedIn's bottom line. And so it's in their interest to make it really easy for them to find you. And so you can buy LinkedIn Recruiter, you can spend all this money, but if you just make sure that your profile has the right keywords and is super desirable and attractive, you can do that without spending a cent. So that's the first thing. The second thing are things like endorsements or these new features that are all around like, hey, LinkedIn's a social network too. It's viral, it's fun, it's exciting. And at the end of the day, I say good for LinkedIn. It's great marketing for them. But LinkedIn should always be first and foremost a tool for you, the job seeker. You want to achieve a specific outcome, and LinkedIn is the best way to get there. And it doesn't involve all these schemes or doing all this other stuff. It's like, just understand the recruiter, serve their needs, get found by the algorithm, get chosen for opportunity. And if you come back to that time and again, you can't go wrong.
I love that. And I think that idea of it being a tool is incredibly important, and almost looking at everything in the job search as tools that you have at your disposal, right? Like people look at everything and they take everything so personally, like your personal brand. Oh, it has to represent everything about me. It's like, no, it has to sell your services. It's like, oh, I need to like make these amazing connections and like be friends with everyone. I mean, sure, it's nice if you get a friendship, but like professional connections are great. Like there's all sorts of things that we get wrapped up in the blurring of lines because social networks are blurry. Where do you feel like people maybe fall into a trap when it comes to using these tools? Maybe forgetting that they are tools. Like, what are some of the things that we can do to sort of keep a rational head while getting into this space?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like again, as LinkedIn adds more Me Too social media features, like videos and polls and all this kind of stuff, you can think, oh, I've got to like build really strong relationship here as if it was, another Facebook or something like that. But the beauty of networking, at least in the North American business culture, is that weak ties, science has actually shown, are much more powerful for helping you find opportunity than strong ties. And basically what the sociologists are getting at there is that your best friends, your family, all the people you might naturally gravitate towards to help you find a job, they're not that helpful. It's for the simple reason that they know the same people you know. So, basic network theory, you have these overlapping networks. Whereas it's the weak ties, that person you worked with 3 jobs ago, or your old professor, whomever like that, they may be 3 or 4 degrees separated from you, but that's the person who actually knows about the new information and the new opportunity that you weren't even aware of. And so when you come to LinkedIn, always think about that power of weak ties, where you don't have to have 20 years of deep relationship with someone in order to say, hey, I saw your team is hiring. Would you introduce me to the hiring manager? Or I'm curious about a role in product management. Is that something that you could share 10 minutes of your time with? For the most part, people love to pay it forward to share that advice. And the number one thing that you can do as a job seeker is just to ask, to put yourself out there, and now you're in the game.
It's so true. I actually had someone from high school reach out to me like maybe a year ago. And they were like, hey, I see you're working at this place. You mind putting in a good word for me? And I was like, well, you weren't the nicest person to me in high school, but you weren't the meanest person. So I guess I'll help. People are way more kind than people are more kind to us than we are to ourselves sometimes.
Yes.
And I think that
Yes.
we get in our own way here. And I think part of that is sort of the culture of the job search. There's so much stuff out there like focused on your passion and focused on your meaning and all these different things, and there's a lot of good stuff in there, but there's also a lot of stuff that overwhelms people, right? You're going through this big life transition, and people are also trying to like pile on the fact that you have to find like your God-given meaning on the planet as well. It's like, I just want to get paid. One of the things that I hear people complain about with LinkedIn all the time, and this is sort of in the same vein of it being a tool, right? Is that we keep adding tools, but we never seem to take away any tools from the job search. So like cover letters made sense when we were sending real letters or faxes because they introduced who you are and what job you're applying to. But now everything is like tied to the actual posting. So why do we need all these things? Is there anything that you've seen that any tools that have fallen off, or maybe people don't need to focus as much on, and they should shift their focus to other things like certain features of LinkedIn?
Yeah. And I really do think that LinkedIn is both given and taken away there. Again, it's created all this confusion by adding all these new things in. People assume anything LinkedIn adds, they have to do. Absolutely wrong. Recruiters only care about a few things, and so should you. And so if you put yourself in the recruiter's shoes and you imagine a giant pile of resumes and cover letters that people have spent hours and hours sweating over, but they're totally anonymous strangers, versus one handpicked candidate who your best friend of the company has whispered into your ear, you've got to check out Martin. Martin is amazing. Now, even if Martin has no cover letter and has spent maybe 1 hour on his resume total, who do you think you're going to pick with your scarce time as a recruiter? Are you going to pick the anonymous strangers, or are you going to pick that friend of a friend? And human nature and science shows us time and again, it's all about those relationships.